Hey, Bino, it's time to hop in the Wayback Machine.
The Wayback Machine?
We could go to a simpler, well, maybe it wasn't, it was a simpler year for us because we didn't have responsibilities, right?
As a child,
Yeah.
yes. That's what I've always discussed with people. Hey, before we get this, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah. Hey.
I'm Bino. That's Derek. This is the Get Geekish podcast. We do this every week. Thanks for joining us, tuning in. Feel free to jump in and share some of your thoughts at Get Geekish on the social medias. But to your point, we were going to talk about the times of yesteryear. A lot of us have those we've discussed it in the past, the kind of sense memories, like the one behind your background and now. The thought of just walking around a video store on a Friday night as something to do, to find the movie, get some snacks, hang out with friends, and some of those different moments throughout childhood, especially, really bring back some fond memories. So we're gonna take a trip down memory lane in some of these, and hopefully bring back some fun memories for you, the listener, and maybe you can share some with us as well.
What are you talking about? I'm actually at a video store right now.
You're the last one ever?
Yeah. Where's that at?
I think it's Seattle.
Pretty sure where it is?
Yeah, if you follow the last Blockbuster on Twitter, they're gold.
Let's see where they're at.
And speaking of Blockbuster, because we're not being promoted, paid to promote a thing. One of my fond memories of Blockbuster here. This was me in middle school when I won the store champion for the video game tournament they had. Nerding it up all the way back then. And the only reason I won is because I got lucky playing Judge Dredd and beat the first boss in like a minute.
Dude, that game sucked. Oh, I hated that game.
Yeah, it was tough.
It is located in Bend, Oregon.
Oregon. Okay, Seattle, Oregon's close. Pacific Northwest. But I don't want to say it, but the kids these days will never realize. But this was back in the day when there's video VHS tapes and DVDs were just starting to come around. But if you wanted to watch a movie, you weren't paying a whole lot for cable, and you still had to start in the right time. Even for my rich friends that had HBO, there was only a handful of movies you could watch, and you still had to start up at a certain time. If the movie started at 5:00 and it was 6:00, you're like, oh crap! Now I got to wait till next Thursday till this comes on again.
Dude, that was the worst. So, for one, let me just apologize to everybody if we rehash stuff we've already talked about. This is how our brains work. But my grandma had cable. We didn't have cable, but my grandma had cable. And I remember going over her house Friday nights, and she still had TV Guide, but I always ignored the TV Guide, and I went to that stupid channel.
The TV Guide channel.
Where if you missed your channel, you had to wait, and dear God, that thing scrolled so slow.
If you remember, it was just a scrolling feed that went about that fast. That listed all the channels and what was on, and you could see the next hour and a half of programming coming up.
When I don't know what's worse. So you know how they had the scroll one, and then they had the one where it'd flash, and then stay on there, and then it'd come back and then flash with a different set of channels.
That sounds awful.
You've never dealt with that one?
I don't think I remember that one.
That's the one that
quite possibly I did, but
I think that's one they kind of have in hotels now. If you're going through the channel guide, they have they'll have a cluster up on the screen.
Oh yeah.
And then it'll go away, and then a new cluster will come up, and you have to sit there and go really quick. But anyway, back to my thing is with the scrolling. I remember, especially Friday nights, Nickelodeon rocked. It just had that set of all of that kablam, Hey Arnold cartoon set all going up.
See, I'm slightly jealous of your 90s Nickelodeon because I'm not a whole lot older. I'm just a little bit older than you. And when I was the age of watching lots of Nickelodeon, Friday nights was like Nick at Night time, which I liked some of the shows. But when you're 10 years old, Donna Reed, Leave It to Beaver, Dennis the Menace, stuff like that was not really, My Three Sons. Those weren't really kid programs you looked forward to. I watched them, but
yeah. Well, it is the thing, because that's the thing is if you missed, because my grandma with cable, for some reason she had East Coast Nickelodeon and West Coast Nickelodeon, so the things were different. So I remember you sitting there watching it, and you look at the time, you're like, okay, it's 6:45 and you're like, I missed Kablam. Why?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, because it's right in the middle. Or like you said, you're sitting there watching a movie, you're like, oh, it's halfway through it and you have to wait, because like HBO for some reason like would do blocks where they would just air stuff.
And I hate it on cable too, because they always mentioned everything like times. It was it starts at Nickelodeon 8/7 Central, and to this day I don't know what the hell any of that meant. If something is 8/7 Central, what does that mean? It's on at 8 o'clock but 7 Central, or it's on at 8 and then 7 Central, and it always confused the heck out of me. And I never ever figured it out for the Mountain Standard Time where I lived.
I think eventually I figured it out, but you're right, because you're sitting there as a kid, you're like, oh, cool, I want to watch that new episode of Rocko's Modern Life or whatever, and it's like, tune in this Friday at 7 Central. You're like, Mom?
What time is 9/7 Central? And if it's like a movie or something like that, you get it wrong, you tune in and you pop on the TV like, oh, this is the climax of the movie. Cripes.
I don't know what was more disappointing, like missing it completely or popping on in the middle of it. You know what I mean? You just like, oh.
And that's why we record them on VHS tapes, because I remember trying to get, I want to say it was Ollie Hop Noodles Haven of Bliss that we talked about last week. I think I found out I was looking on, and the next time it was on was like at 2:00 in the morning on a Tuesday on the Disney Channel. So I set an alarm clock and got myself up to turn that VCR on at 2:00 in the morning to make sure I got it.
Did you not trust to set the VCR to record it?
This was before VCRs had that capability.
Oh, snap. So I used to have my grandma like record The Simpsons on Sunday nights. Mm-hmm. So I could watch them on my like lunch break from school, because she lived right across the street from the school. Mm-hmm. So I'd have her record them. And there's a couple times where I hit play. I'm like, it's a soap opera. I'm like,
Nana!
I know. She forgot to set it up. All right, I guess I'll watch as the world turns.
Back to the start of this tangent, the video store behind you. That was the thing to do on the weekends, especially when you're like middle school, high school age. That was what you did. The weekend rolled around and you and your family, or you and your friends, went to the video store. Maybe you rode your bike, maybe you drove, maybe you got dropped off. You walked in there, you wandered around aimlessly looking up at all the new releases, what's still in stock, what's not in stock, what you want to watch. Wander down all the old movies, find out what you'd settle for to watch something you've already watched, because it was only like $1 when renting a new movie was like $5. Which I remember complaining about the prices. New releases are $3.99. What is this?
I was gonna say nowadays. Oh man, it was funny because, you know, if we wanted to go to a Blockbuster or a Showtime, or what was the other one?
Hollywood Video,
yeah, that was the one. If we wanted to go to any of those, we'd have to drive, 30 minutes or whatever. So the little town that I grew up in, but that I went to school in, we lived maybe like 15 minutes away from it. Friday after school and go to my grandma's. My dad would swing by, pick me up. We'd go to the video store. Again, this is a small town store. It doesn't get a whole bunch of copies of new releases. So you'd go in and be like, they don't have it. So that's where exactly what you said. You're like, well, should we settle for something that we've already seen that we don't own? And then you get it home and it's not rewound. That was annoying.
Please be kind, rewind. Those stickers on everything.
Yep. Or you'd sit there and like midway through it, the tracking gets all screwed up. So you're sitting there like trying to remember if it's up or down on the tracking thing to fix that.
But there's something magical, because when you're with a group of people, and then you'd be in there for, I don't know about you, but we'd be in video stores for 30, 40, 60 minutes at a time, just meandering around, then discussing movies, talking about movies, arguing over what we should watch or shouldn't watch. And it was part of the evening.
Then you get the tap on the shoulder. We're closing soon. You're like, oh, crap.
And then they always had like the best candy at video stores, but it was always so freaking overpriced.
This thing right here, the little candy, like the little pinball machine where you get a gumball and try to get more gumballs. Mm-hmm. That was always a lot of fun.
Yeah. But it was something about it. And they were cool. Like I rented a bunch of movies from grocery stores because back in the day, even grocery stores had video
Mhm.
rental sections in them. But it just wasn't quite the same because it didn't have that ambiance that video stores had. They always had that smell of popcorn because some of them actually had popcorn in the store you could get. There's always movie trailers shown on the screens, or some of the really cool ones actually had movies that they showed on the screens in the store. I mean, it's one of those things of
But
nostalgia.
you used to work at a video store, right?
Yes, I worked at a
Yeah.
Showtime Video, which was a local chain that had probably the biggest selection of non-new release movies I've ever seen in my life. And then I worked at a Blockbuster Video in college for a couple of years.
My wife worked at a Hollywood video, and she was just telling me stories of like, you'd sit there and what was it, like once a month you would just have that promotional thing playing on the TV with just trailers and like little clips of songs. You'd never get the full song or anything like that, and you just get so burnt out on it.
To this day, I have 15 to 30 seconds of Sum 41's Make No Difference, Creed, What If, Angela Villa, Picture Perfect that were on loop at the Blockbuster I worked at. That same tape got played, and I think that was the time I was on Christmas break or something like that. So I was working 30 to 40 hours a week at the video store of that same 20-minute tape on loop over and over and over and over and over.
See, that's why I liked my little local video store that we had. We'd go in there and they'd have a TV up on the wall, and they'd just, be playing random movies that they would just pick. Because I
Mhm.
remember a couple times I went in there, they started to know me after a while, but I'd go in there and they're like, "Oh, that movie's done. Which one should we play?" And I'd get to pick out one and put it in there, and they got to know me too because, again, we lived not way out in the boonies, but far enough away from the big city that I became obsessed with Mel Brooks films. The video store didn't have a lot of them that I could rent, so I just ended up, I was like, oh, okay, I can purchase them. They're like, and they'd pull out this phone book looking thing that had basically every movie known to man in it, and they'd sit there and go, yeah, we can order that. It's going to be, I'm pretty sure I paid like $25 for a VHS of Mel Brooks To Be or Not to Be, and the producers, and
I
High
remember that buck.
Anxiety. Yep.
Well, that was kind of great too about video stores. Of I think you still got on the tail end of it too. Of they were the ultimate gatekeepers for movies for a decade or two,
Mm-hmm.
because you, with those small stores, you go and you talk to somebody, and it was somebody that knew their stuff. Most people that worked at video stores, self included. I mean, I remember walking out with stacks of movies when I worked at Showtime in high school. There's no way I watched any less than 7 to 10 movies a week. It was just always on somewhere. But people come in and ask, and you could tell everything about it, and you had to memorize movie covers and actors and names and things like that, because people go, well, oh, you're out of this movie. Oh, well, have you tried this one? Have you seen this one? If you liked that, you're going to like this one. And if you wanted to ask somebody something, you could literally go in and be like, do you guys have that movie with that guy with the big hair and oh yeah, we've got that right over here. There was something magical about that.
Not to sound like kids these days, but they'll never know that disappointment of going into the video store, seeing a movie that you're like, oh, I forgot about this. You go up and grab it, and it's just that stupid empty cardboard box.
Yeah, because they always had the empty box, and then they had the real plastic case with the VHS tape behind it.
The clamshell one.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But the worst of it, the disappointment of not being there was bad. But the worst is when you grab it, check out, go home, and realize that somebody put the wrong tape behind the movie and you never bothered to look. Those were the worst nights ever.
I think, what did we, I don't remember what it was, but it was also the thing too, is you're sitting there, you're like, I paid money for this, I'm going to watch it. It's not like nowadays when you start watching a Netflix thing, you're like, this looks interesting. You watch it like, nope, this is garbage, and turn it off. Mm-hmm. You had to actually like, I paid $4.99 for this. I have it for 2 days. Might as well watch it.
Yeah, could probably watch it twice if I tried hard enough.
I'm pretty sure like that's how I got my parents to watch Biodome. It's not a great movie, but
entertaining.
Well, not their humor. But I remember we were watching it. My parents were like, this is dumb, but we kept watching it because they paid $5 to watch it. So
it's the other part too is that the movie covers ended up being a very, very big marketing part of the movie, because it became, the movie poster was the front of the case, and that became like the way you recognized everything. Nowadays, most movies come out and they already have 3 or 4 different versions. They've got a different case for the DVD and the Blu-ray and the UHD, and then the special edition steelbook, and then the digital copy, and they've all got different promotional pictures to keep it lively, but there's no continuity, so you have no idea what it is, and they change them all the time. Movies back then, whoa,
there's a fly, sorry.
You recognized the front of that movie, and if it was a bad cover, it was a tough sell for people.
Well, the thing that didn't help too is with VHS. I mean, with DVDs, they got a little bit better about it. Some of them not so much, but you pick up the movie, you're like, oh, this looks kind of interesting. You turn it over to read what it's about, and then, they have the little screenshots on the back. And sometimes they would have like 2 sentences. They're like, a man goes to a town. It's haunted. And then that's it. You're like, I don't want to watch
for
this.
That description.
And then you look at some of the screenshots, you're like, this looks like garbage.
It's amazing to think back of, how would I put this, Hollywood quality in 1989 versus Hollywood quality now. You see some of these movies that came out, and like, I can see the boom mic in that scene. It looks like the screen's pixelated. That's part of the film reel that's showing up in the side. Like
Yeah.
Movie making has come a long, long way.
Sometimes I would say it's come too far of a way, because I mean, how many times have you walked through like a Target now and you're looking through the movies and you're like, what is, because like they're doing a lot of straight to DVDs recently, because they know that they're like, we can get the movie made, but it's not going to be a theater release. Okay, let's do it. So you're sitting there watching it, or you just look at the DVD, and that's the ones that don't put any effort into. You flip it over, you're like, well, this has one of the actors I like in it, but it doesn't sound very appealing. So then you put it back down.
I think there's a lot of those on there. I honestly, with as much as it costs to make a movie, I don't know how so many of these bottom tier ones actually get made. Because you think about that, even back in this time, you go like the late 80s, the number of movies that came out in total was a very countable number.
Mm-hmm.
Like every week there was 1 or 2 big movies that came out in theaters, if it was even every week, and then a few smaller indie releases here and there. Now you look at new releases and there's 10, 15, 20 movies a week that are coming out year round.
Well, that's not even counting the ones that are being released exclusively on Netflix or Amazon or Hulu originals. You have all these streaming services now that are getting into the movie game, and it is overwhelming, because like they're just throwing in. There's been a couple times where I've seen something on Netflix, I'm like, I've never even heard of this movie. You watch it and you're like, that was really good, but it just gets buried by everything else. And I think that goes back to the spending hours in a movie store where you're like, no.
I was going to say that exact same feeling is what I saw on lots and lots of customers' faces in the video store. We had I think that's why a lot of Blockbusters in Hollywood ended up being kind of small and tried to segment things off, because it seems more palatable. Because we had this Showtime Video that worked, and it was, I think the building ended up becoming a Hobby Lobby years later, something like that. So it was a lot of square footage. And I think people walked in and would get overwhelmed, because you're looking through a streaming service. You go, oh, okay, I'll look at the comedy movies, or look at the action movies, or like the recommend for me, and you scroll through 30 or 40 movies. But when you walk into that physical store and you see wall to wall that there's somewhere between 20 and 60,000 movies sitting on the shelves for you ready to take home, it's almost a little overwhelming. And a lot of people just had that kind of like, oh God, somebody just tell me what I want. I don't, oh no.
Well, see, that's where you find the different breed of people, where you and I like doing that. Like, that's why you go to comic book shops, or like the nerd stores, or even like Comic-Cons when you're going down Artist Alley or whatever. You just love just looking at everything, trying to take it all in. And then you see some people who are just like, I
don't know what any of this means.
Well, also, so you worked at a video store. You can weigh in on this. Like, I know, being a customer in a video store, I overheard some of these issues where you have the couples fighting over what to watch because they took forever to figure out what they wanted to eat. So now they're trying to figure out what to watch, and they're arguing about it. And then you have the person coming in demanding a refund because the movie was not as good as they thought, or the movie was damaged. Obviously, that happened a little bit more on with DVDs because nobody knew how to take care of them, which was a pain. But
Nobody took care of VHS tapes either. You'd be surprised.
That's true. That's very, very true. I just remember, I don't remember what movie it was, but I remember some lady was arguing with the video store person because they didn't like the movie, but they still watched it. And it's like,
well, that was interesting, especially working Blockbuster was different, but for the local store, it was great because we had a policy if somebody brought a movie back that said they hated it, we just let them get something else.
mm-hmm.
And there were people that come in that were spewing fire to say how horrible it was, and there was nothing better to be like, oh, well, you want something else then? Sorry, you didn't like that. And like they get all deflated because they're ready to like ream you and throw it, and you're like, oh, cool, grab something else then. Sorry, you picked out and chose a movie you didn't like. Sorry, get a different one. What I love were the people that complain about late fees.
Oh,
because
yeah.
late fees were ridiculous, but what a lot of people didn't realize at the time of video stores is those VHS tapes the stores had to buy. Prior to Blockbuster getting that thing where they had the guaranteed in stock, where they literally had like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of copies of the new releases. Prior to that, most new releases were expensive. Like a single tape was somewhere between $25 and $125. So a lot of those new releases, those small video stores literally had, okay, I've got to pay $5 for 2 nights. So I need to rent this movie every night for 3 months before I'm going to make a profit on it.
Right.
So those late fees got chalked up big time and people got so upset. But every video store I've ever worked at or ever heard about had such lenient policies that people still couldn't handle it. I think the Showtime I worked at, if movies were due at 9 o'clock the night before, we didn't have the scanner set until noon the following day. So you literally had to be 15 hours late with your movie before it was actually counted late. And everybody had the sobs. I put it in at 9:15 last night. How you're going to charge me for being 5 minutes late? Blah, blah, blah. And you're looking at me like, I know that wasn't the case. Or people that would throw in their sob story and slam on the table. I never returned a movie late in my entire life. How dare you say this? And you're staring at their account history and they've returned 17 of the last 20 movies late. Or the ones that you see them drop it in the box on the way in, then come to the counter, check out a movie like, you still have a movie checked out? Oh, no, I brought that back yesterday. You should check your return pile. I brought it back yesterday. You mean the movie,
yes,
the one you just dropped in on the way in? The one-way windows threw people off with that because they didn't realize you could see them putting it in there and then claim you were an idiot and didn't check it yesterday.
Well, I feel like some of them, and this could just be made up in my head because the 90s had a whole bunch of like, I don't know, like TV shows and cartoons had that whole, at least a storyline about returning a movie late at one point. Because I can remember some of them, but didn't some video stores have like a little scanner that clocked it when it went in because they had the barcode on the outside? Or am I just making that up because I saw it in a show?
I think a couple stores tried doing stuff like that, but it didn't work very well because even the idea of like today with the library RF tags and stuff like that, you could make that happen. But back then they'd try to do things like that and it just didn't work well enough to happen. Somebody literally had to scan the barcode, make sure that it was checked in. Because then you also got the people that brought them to the wrong place, which Sunday mornings were the greatest time on earth because you got to go through the box of movies that were returned from other video stores. And I never understood how people could do it that bad because I could understand when there's 4 Blockbusters in town, you rent it from Blockbuster, you bring it back to the wrong Blockbuster. I could see how that happens pretty easy. You forgot which one you went to, or you give it to your mom to return it, don't tell her which one, something like that. But the Blockbuster versus the Hollywood video versus the Showtime video versus the King Supers, all the clamshells were completely different colors, different logos on the side of it, like had the addresses printed on the front.
And stickers all over them.
Yeah, you go through the front, you're like, who on earth would bring this here?
Those are the same people that call an Xbox and a PlayStation a Nintendo.
Yeah. But we'd get to call those, and I loved getting the Hollywood video because Hollywood video had an adult section. And sometimes we get those returned to us, and there's nothing greater than calling somebody Sunday morning like, oh, yeah, excuse me, we have a copy of Ramrod 16, and you guys want to come pick that up? Okay, thanks.
Oh man.
Good times, good times.
I'm gonna end with this. I'm gonna segue and end with this. Another huge disappointment with video stores, but also at the same time I kind of appreciated was not the movie aspect, but when you wanted to play a new game, if you didn't get there early enough. Because I remember, especially during the summer, I knew what time the video store opened. I knew that I had to get there I knew that they got this in at this time. And if you didn't get there early enough to get that new game.
And game rentals were long because movie rentals were like 2 to 5 days, but game rentals you get like for a full week. So if somebody rented that game, you're like, crap.
I know it's not like how Redbox did, where it was only like what was it, $3 to rent it, and then it was something a night for a little bit for games. But like, yeah, it was my friend had the 64. We went to go rent something, and it was gone. We're like, no. So then you rent the next best thing. You're like, yes. But it was also nice too because you would actually be able to rent the game and try it, rather than nowadays. I mean, Redbox is gone. You could do GameFly, but if you want a new game, you go drop $60 on it, and then you take the chance of not liking it.
Yeah, everything's got, we got the Game Pass for you. Really? So I can pay you $10 a month so I can spend 17 hours installing games I don't like?
Yeah.
So we've made this almost entire podcast about VHS stores, and I'm kind of okay with that.
Yep.
We'll have to talk about some other memory lane stories. Like if you can't tell, this was a big part of our lives. I mean, after we watched all the video stores, my next thing is once I got a video camera, so we went around and we made movies all the time as a kid. Why? Because movies were so cool.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I wish like you could bring back that feeling of going into the video store. Maybe we need to make a trip to Bend, Oregon, I guess. Go into that block, but will they rent to us since we're out of state?
I don't even have to rent anything. I just want to go in and feel it. Like, there's got to be a few video stores left around because I think there might be one in Fort Collins or Loveland that's still around, but it's just a tiny, tiny little place. But
I still have a Blockbuster card in my wallet for some reason. I still carry it around. I can't bring myself to get rid of it.
Yeah, there's a few of those things that everybody had one.
Yep.
It's a rite of passage.
I still have it. I'm just looking at it. I'm like, I can't. I just put it right back in my wallet because I don't know why. Maybe I'm like, yeah, it'll come back like Toys R Us.
It's amazing how busy those things got too.
Blockbusters?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like their slow times were okay, but you got on the Friday and Saturday afternoons and evenings, and we started in a store. Like when I was in Fort Collins at the Blockbuster, I was assistant manager training, blah blah blah. So I got to see all the numbers and things like that. And that tiny little store on a busy weekend would do $9,000 to $15,000 in a night.
Jeez.
That's a lot of people coming in and out for movies that are $3 a piece.
Well, and you know how you said that they did the Blockbuster move to the guarantee in stock thing?
Mm-hmm.
It was never more telling of how bad a movie was when you went in and you saw 20 copies of it and only 3 were gone and it just came out.
There was a lot of guesswork, and I think a lot of people got fired for stuff like that.
Yeah. You walk in.
That was also the time when you noticed when Blockbuster started selling other used movies because of that same phenomenon. And all of a sudden you can find out once the time frame comes, because they had exact dates that went through of after it's been this many weeks on new release, it goes to the next tier down. Then after this tier, then we take off this many of the copies to put on the sale at $18.99. The next week we take another 20 copies, put it down, mark it down to $14.99. 2 weeks later, take another stack out of the circulation, drop them into $12.99.
So I lived across the street from a Blockbuster, and with the sale thing that you said, I'd walk in there to rent a movie, and then you walk past that stupid thing that's like 5 for $25. You're like, let's take a look. And you end up walking out. You're like, I didn't need this.
Or they do the sales. I think a couple times a year they have big sales. Was buy 2 get 1 free, or buy 5 get 5, or something like that. And people would just. But I remember we had folding tables set up that were probably stacked 20 or 30 movies high. And I think the one they had the Green Mile. It looked worse because it was a 2 VHS movie. Mm-hmm. But by the time it was marked down to $9.99 for used copies of it, I want to say the store I worked at probably had 200 or 300 copies of it that we needed to sell.
Jeez. Yeah. I don't miss that part of going in and going, well, this was an okay movie, right? And then adding it, and you're like doing the math. You're like, okay, 5 for 25. Which 5 would I get? You know, I always had that argument with myself. Like, hypothetically, which of these 5 movies would I get? Well, I get that one. That one was okay. I guess I'd get that. No, I'd get this one. And then by the end of it, you're actually holding. You're like, okay.
I was always the price nerd too, because I always had the sales. I wanted, when things like buy one get one free, I wanted to make sure I got the same value. So I'd be getting a lot of crappy ones because, well, I got this one that's $9.99 and this one's $5.99. But if I get this one free, I'm only getting a free $6 movie. So I better find another $9.99 movie, and then I'll find another $6 movie, because that way I'll get one of this. And it was backfired too.
That's why we both have a very high movie count on DVDs.
Slightly OCD, it happens.
But I don't know about you, but there was one time when we were in radio, I took a quiz, I think it was a BuzzFeed one, that's like, if you've seen 100 and some odd of these movies, you're a nerd or whatever like that. And because somebody had shared it like, oh, I've only seen 5. I guess I'm smart. I damn near clicked every one of them. And I was like, huh, what does that say about me?
Yeah, I was easily in the 80s or 90s for that one. I remember that list. It was almost embarrassing.
Anyway.
Video stores. Nostalgia. I love them. I miss them. But I'm also glad we don't have to use them.
Yeah, there's pros and cons to it.
Yeah. So what's your favorite memories of video stores? Let us know at Get Geekish, Facebook, Instagram, all those places. And share some of your video store memories. What's some crazy story that, because it was also the social hub, so a lot of things went down at video stores. So share some of those stories with us. Love to hear. And as always, thanks for being a part of Get Geekish.
We'll check you out next time.
With no late fees.